Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another live stream. Thank you so much for joining me, everyone. Welcome to all of our members, subscribers, viewers. Thank you so much for tuning in for another live stream. I posted a video earlier on with latest updates from Yemen, from Gaza, and from Lebanon. And the most dangerous escalation that we had came from Lebanon. Israel again assassinated a senior figure in Hizbullah during a time where we're supposed to be talking about a ceasefire and an ending of the escalation. That was the deepest attack that they had in Lebanon since the 8th of October. And Hizbullah haven't responded yet to that attack, and we just saw their response for the recent assassination, the one before last, and their massive attack on Israel. So the next couple of days might see a lot of escalation in Lebanon. And in Yemen, they're clearly preparing for something much bigger. Just in case something breaks out, these people are having drills resembling the attack on Israeli bases and using all sorts of methods. So, although we have this talk about a ceasefire, clearly everyone else is prepared. Everyone is prepared. And also in Gaza, we had a very intense day too, that I spoke about in more detail in my video, so you can go ahead and watch it after this live stream. In this live stream, I want to talk to you about a statement that Anthony Blinken had a couple of days ago. So he's obviously calling for a de-escalation, having a deal with Lebanon. Many people are leaking this unsubstantiated information about the Lebanese resistance having certain deals. They had the German mediator, head of intelligence, if I'm not mistaken, he met with the Secretary General of Hizbullah. And some people started to have leaks as if they have all of the information. That Hizbullah would agree to retract slightly and, sanctions will be lifted and what have you. Nothing that we received a confirmation about. And as if, Hezbollah is waiting for them. Anyway, they told them so long that there's a war in Gaza, we're continuing the attacks. Don't even try and talk with us. Stop Israel. That's the logic. Stop this genocidal state. Talking with the resistance movements, trying to apply pressure. On what? On people trying to defend themselves? Go and talk with the genocidal state, with the criminal state, with the terrorist state. That's occupying, that's a neo-colonialist, expansionist entity. Talk with them. They're going to talk with Hezbollah and with Hamas, and no, and don't, and escalate. Carrot and stick. Clearly not working. But he had a very interesting statement that I wanted to share with you, and then I'll obviously open the space up for all of you in the live stream. And again, if you're new, welcome to the live stream. Live streams are extended versions where we talk in more detail. So if you're a fan of short videos, short and brief videos, go ahead to my video section. If you like more in-depth talk, analysis, and hearing the community, participating as well, sharing views and asking questions, this is the right place. J-Post, Jerusalem Post, they posted an article quoting obviously Blinken. It was reported on multiple media outlets as well. The title was Blinken saying Israel effectively lost sovereignty in the north due to Hezbollah. Israel has lost sovereignty in the northern part of its country due to the persistent cross-border attacks Hezbollah has launched against Israel since October, U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said on Monday. Is that good news or bad news, Mr. Blinken? because it doesn't sound like bad news to me, but I'm not sure, is he sad or is he happy? Seems sad, the man. Israel lost territory. Well, which territory that they occupy? Quote, people don't feel safe to go to their homes. Oh no. He said during a public interview at the Brookings Institute in Washington. Absent doing something about the insecurity, people won't have the confidence to return. Blinken. You know, the Palestinian refugees in Lebanon, they hadn't had an option to return for 76 years. How about you talk about that? They didn't have an option to go back to their lands that they were expelled from in 1948 for 76 years. How about you tell us about that for a bit, Mr. Blinken? He spoke as close to 60,000 Israelis, wrong number. Way more than 100,000. It was 85 in the beginning, 85,000. So they're trying to, underplay it. But that's the Jerusalem Post. He spoke as close to 60,000 Israelis from the northern border communities are unable to return home, and the areas remain largely deserted. International concern remained high that the almost 9 months of cross-border violence would escalate into a third Lebanon war. Lufthansa Group on Monday halted night flights to and from Beirut until July 31st. Due to the situation in the Middle East, a spokesperson for the company said the change had begun on June 29 and daytime flights would operate as before. Swiss International Airlines Lufthansa Group subsidiary also said it would move its Beirut night flights to the daytime until the end of July due to the political developments at the border between Lebanon and Israel. Blinken said that there is a momentum leading to a larger war between Hizbullah and the IDF. Well, Israel added fuel to that today. But that, he continued, paradoxically, no one really wants to see a larger war break out. Quote, none of the main actors actually want a war. Israel doesn't want a war, although they may well be prepared to engage in one if necessary, he said. I don't believe Hezbollah actually wants a war. Lebanon certainly doesn't want a war because it would be the leading victim in such a war, Blinken said. I don't believe that Iran wants a war, in part because it wants to make sure that Hezbollah is not destroyed. He's trying to have a dig. And that it can hold Hezbollah as a card if it needs it, if it ever gets into direct conflict with Israel. Well, how about the US, Mr. Blinken? Does the US want a war? Why don't you tell us that the US doesn't want a war and is petrified of a war because all of its bases in the Middle East will be in shooting range of Iran and everyone else in the region? No, he wouldn't say that, Blinken. The best option is a diplomatic arrangement by which Hezbollah would pull back from the border area near Israel, he said. Hezbollah, they're on their lands, Hezbollah. It's Israel that's not on its lands. The United States has been deeply engaged in trying to advance this diplomacy. I don't think so. You've been supporting this genocidal state with weapons of mass destruction. Well, devastating weapons. In Israel, MK Benny Gantz, who heads the National Unity Party, called on the Lebanese army to act against Hezbollah and ensure that the Iranian proxy group is relocated away from the border with Israel. Quote, they need to make sure Hezbollah stops. Hezbollah needs to decide whether it's an Iranian branch or a Lebanese organization and pay the price for what comes with this, Gantz told a group of European ambassadors. He spoke at an event sponsored by the European Leadership Network, stressing, quote, I will not agree to the reality as it is now in our northern arenas to continue. Gantz, a former IDF chief of staff and a former defense minister, had been a minister in the government's war cabinet, but withdrew from the National Unity Coalition in June, thereby rendering him unable to participate in decisions regarding the war. They ended it there. What do we understand from this? Firstly, there's a very real likelihood of an escalation. And that was 4 days ago. That's not with this development today, with this assassination in Baalbek, deep into Lebanon, 112 kilometers from the Israeli borders. And again, Blinken is saying like everyone is worried, apart from the US, as if the US is not worried, right? The US is petrified of an escalation. Everyone is petrified, apart from Hizbullah and Iran and Hamas and everyone. It's the resistance movements in the region who are not scared of anything. What would they face? A genocide? They're facing a genocide. It's Israel that's petrified. It's the US that's petrified. Obviously, no one wants an all-out war. People would rather get their rights and things they want diplomatically. Who doesn't? But in terms of scared, it's the US that's petrified. Petrified, but stuck, stuck with this Zionist lobby because it's controlled by Zionism. Like the UK, like some European countries, controlled by Zionism. The fact that he's saying that Israel is losing sovereignty, this is a very important statement, by the way, coming from someone like Antony Blinken. And it's true. It's reflecting the reality of what's happening in Israel. And the more problematic thing is the fact that Israel is unable to provide an answer. Whether they go on as if nothing happened in the past 8 months with Hizbullah, that's just talking for the Northern Front now, although the situation in the south with the people around Gaza is very similar, if not the same. If they want to act like nothing happened in the past 8 months, that's not going to buy people reassurance. And if they're going to go on an escalation with Hizbullah, that's it. Seal the deal. Seal the deal very quickly. They wouldn't know when to stop. They wouldn't know who's going to participate. They wouldn't know how hard Hezbollah will attack them. They wouldn't know the surprises. They're expecting certain things already, and they're taking it very seriously, like infrastructure, electricity, ports, refineries, oil, military bases, they already know it's going to be targeted. But that's just, the bank of targets that Hezbollah published in their hudhud. And they said there's more to come. So they haven't published everything yet. After this assassination today, we're expecting quite an intense retaliation from Hezbollah. Could potentially be the biggest yet. Why? Because you're talking about another figure in Hezbollah, although we haven't heard a lot of elaboration from Lebanon yet. This happened this evening. And it's the deepest attack in Lebanon yet. And usually between Hezbollah and Israel, there's the underlying understanding that's not really written of escalation or escalation, deep, you go deep, I go deep, you escalate, I escalate, etc. So there could be a very big response, if not the biggest yet. So far, we've had over 200 missiles a day. Hezbollah has the capacity to launch 10,000 missiles a day. If Hamas in Gaza launched 5,000 missiles on the 7th of October, Hezbollah is capable. But obviously, we will see what happens tonight and tomorrow. It could open the door for an all-out war. It could open the door, the retaliation and the level of it, to an all-out war, unless Israel decides to completely have an official ceasefire with Gaza and then go on an all-out war with Lebanon. Not that they're capable, just because these people don't act rationally and don't act based on what's necessary. They're talking about the fact that they're living in an existential threat and that this is a war on their existence and all of that, and they're doing everything to hasten their demise. So again, they could go on an all-out war with Lebanon. Let me open the space up for you. Chocolate Pudding, thank you so much for your super. And also Studio Rainer, thank you so much for your super. Chocolate Pudding said, when is President Sisi next movie coming out? I enjoyed his performance in his hit movie, The Danish Experience. You're going to need to ask the presidency. Call the office. Tell them When is the next hit coming out? Thank you so much for your super. Studio Rainer. Israel civil conflict, it's been there for a very long time. It's been really high and intense before the 7th of October. You know, the intensity started to build up massively after the repeated election campaigns due to Netanyahu's stubbornness. You had 6 elections in 7 years that exhausted Israel as a state and took so much resources. Then that led to obviously this government and the judicial reform moves by Netanyahu before the 7th of October. That's a civil conflict. And then you had the 7th of October, an attempt from Netanyahu to unify the country. Massive failure. It only made the split deeper and deeper. It added salt to the wounds. It made a massive split, distrust in the state. Many people fled, never coming back. Lack of trust in the political leadership, in the military leadership, and the security leadership. It's a disastrous situation. It's an extremely bad situation. Let's see what else we have here. And obviously, if you wouldn't mind, if anyone has any comments for me, if you wouldn't mind highlighting them, just so that we don't miss anything. Stephen Boris saying Herzog predicted a civil war in Israel before the 7th of October. Look, many people warned from civil war in Israel, especially after witnessing what was happening in the judicial reform. As a matter of fact, many people were already warning Netanyahu that our situation is bad. Our enemies are smelling weakness. We're divided. You already had people calling to refuse to serve in the army. You already had, at the time, movements calling for Israelis to flee Israel, groups online forming like migrating together, discussing which areas are good to live in, low rent, decent income, safe, what have you. And obviously some people predicted the 7th of October, like Yitzhak Brik, for example. Hell, Hamas had a drama show 1 year before showing them that they're going to invade. So many people did, but obviously Netanyahu tried to use it to his benefit, but he failed. Marvin Vergus, Eilat port going bankrupt. It's totally bankrupt. The people are sending warnings. How many Zaya ports exist? Mainly, 3 main ones. There's more, but the 3 main ones are obviously the one in Eilat. Haifa is the main one. Haifa is considered to be the gate of Israel. And then you have Ashdod. So these are the 3 main ones. There's one in an area called Ashkelon or Asqalan. There are smaller ones, but the most significant ones are 3 main ones, and they are being targeted. So obviously Eilat is dead. Haifa and Ashdod are targeted regularly by Iraq and Yemen. And the economic situation is devastating. And you have more warnings for more credit companies degrading Israel, apart from Moody's too. The negative projection didn't do them well. As a matter of fact, it was one of the worst things that happened to them, apart from the degrading, the negative projection. The report was a damning report, saying that we don't have faith in the state in the future because they're not taking any action to reach a deal or to de-escalate. So, and again, the Israeli government was in denial. The finance minister was criticizing the report for not labeling Hamas and Hizbullah terror organizations. Imagine how thick that man is. And then Netanyahu said, oh no, that's nothing. After we win, they will raise the grading back up and we will be fine. So you're talking about delusional people. Totally delusional. Stephen Burrows, thank you so much for your super. Amanda Gaiba, thank you so much for your membership and for your comment. We keep praying for Palestine. Thanks, Mahmoud. We also pray for you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. For good health while you're doing what you do. We appreciate your time and excellent input. Bless you. And bless you too. Thank you so much. I appreciate you and your kind words. Thank you so much for that. And Francis Fitzgerald, also, you're very welcome, my friend. Thank you so much for your dedication. Molly addressed the issue. I hope that clarifies. Kate, the northern may be empty, but illegal settlers there are still breathing, unlike Palestinians in Gaza. Do you think the land theft in the West Bank to replace land lost in the northern front? No, this is what happened. So they're not there. That's number one. They're in hotels. Hotels are funded by the state and by Zionist Christian charities in America and in other parts of the world. And the funds are running. So some of these charities are no longer supporting, and the state sometimes stops the support, and these people complain. They call their hotels refugee camps, by the way. Some of the people already permanently left. There were polls for some of the citizens saying we were never going to come back to the north anyway, regardless. Some people already purchased other houses in central parts of Israel, and others left the country. So even if you talk about a de-escalation, it's going to be a devastating situation. A relocation to the West Bank, that could be an option to some of them. But then again, if you're running from an area because of tension, you wouldn't want to go to the West Bank, 24/7 tension. So the people in those areas, I mean, if you don't have an escalation with Hezbollah, relatively quiet, West Bank, you're talking about a very, very tense situation every single day. Every single day. So I'm not sure how many of them would want to move there. I don't think it's a very, attractive area to be in, coming from an area with so much green around you and, quiet areas usually in the north, small. The West Bank is more dense, and obviously you have the tensions, you have the threats. It's boiling now in certain parts. Studio Rainer, thank you so much. You said, do you think Trump will aid Israel after Netanyahu mockery of the US? Trump is a Zionist. Biden is a Zionist. Look at the money. Look at who funds them. If you want to understand the position of someone politically, look at who pays them money. Who paid Donald Trump money? Miriam Edelson. Who's Miriam Edelson? The wife of the late Sheldon Adelson. Who's Sheldon Adelson? A billionaire in the US who's a Zionist, who supports Benjamin Netanyahu and funds him and funds his mouthpieces in Israel. And as a matter of fact, there were some people who considered Trump's presidency as a presidency that was bought by Sheldon Adelson to give Trump some money in return for certain policies when it comes to Israel. Obviously, how much substantiated is that? To an extent, maybe. Probably not to the full extent, but some people say that. And now his wife, right, his widow, she's obviously sending him money. What are we going to expect from him? He obviously is going to have a different type of approach to Biden, but you're talking about people who Trump relies heavily on the evangelical vote. The evangelical community, although we're seeing a lot of changes within the evangelical community, young generation and older generations, they have been the society that supports Israel the most for religious purposes. So he wouldn't want to mess that up as well. Muhammad Yunus, thank you for your super. He said, Salam Mahmoud, not even the orange man can save Israel from an epic strategic loss, inshallah. No one can save them from strategic loss. No one could save them from strategic loss. Because, listen, imagine Trump was there. Imagine Trump was there. He has been criticizing Biden for going into the US reserves, right? And having these silly, stupid policies, as he describes them, in Ukraine and in other parts of the world. If he was the president during this war, What would he give a blank check for Netanyahu? I don't think so. I don't think he will. He's he's talking about America first, make America great again, and prioritizing the US and what have you. And don't forget that it didn't end well between him and Netanyahu. They were close, but when Netanyahu congratulated Biden after he won the presidency, Trump came out against him and said very many bad things about Benjamin Netanyahu because he obviously challenged the results, right? Remember what happened. So it's not like they're best mates. But again, the money plays a big part. Marvin Vergus question, where is the Zaya war complex in Israel concentrated area? As Hamas has targeted these locations? They are spread across many locations. Some of them are visible, some of them are secret. And both Hizbullah and Hamas targeted them, yes. When they are targeted, usually Israel obviously does not declare. Hizbullah destroyed this equation by documenting the targeting with their Almas UAVs and weapons that monitor the target up until the last second, including having cameras on Israel from the mountains of Lebanon, right? High focus zoom capabilities, showing what's happening. So it's not like Israel could say, oh, there's an incident. No, Hezbollah documented everything. So they have targeted them before. They are still targeting them, and they will target them to a larger extent. And Hezbollah, from that perspective, are much more well-equipped than Hamas, especially with the guided weapons. Kate, is it true that Israel's running out of shining toys? Does that include Iron Dome? Look, they're complaining about it. Is it a game? Is it not a game? Clearly, they're complaining. Why would they complain if there's nothing, if they haven't been affected at all? Saying that, after the US said that they were delaying shipments, we had a report saying that the US sent Israel 14,000 Mk-84 since the 7th of October. How much did Israel use out of them? Were they sent before the statement of Biden? They sent them a large chunk of heavily destructive weapons that Israel uses in its genocide to kill civilians. So whether or not they are short of weapons, their situation is dire. Their situation is extremely bad. They have been humiliated by the weakest link in the resistance fronts in the form of Gaza after 9 months of a full invasion and full-blown genocide. Okay, less than 9 months of a ground invasion. Nonetheless, barbaric bombardment. The Iron Dome, it's still active, and the US and Biden himself said that the Iron Dome will still be supported because the rockets for the Iron Dome are sent by the US. But Israel is clearly suffering from some problems in their military, and we also had many statements from the defense minister, from Netanyahu, from Israeli MIC that we need to develop our own weapons across all of the spectrum and not rely on anyone else. So there is clearly a problem. Chocolate pudding, thank you so much. Again, he said, why aren't the walls surrounding Gaza targeted, brought down? Well, it's because there's a big space. There's monitoring, obviously. And whenever someone comes close, they're monitored. Somehow, that wasn't the case on the 7th of October. So Israel went blind on the day. How did they go blind? Was it only because of the resistance? Did they intercept everything? Or was it deliberate? Or they knew something and then they enabled it, right? So it's not a very straightforward thing, but on the 7th of October, 86 points were taken down in that wall. And the Hamas and the resistance, they invaded Israel, recaptured certain territories for a while. That's apart from the, what's it called? Flying guys, no paratroopers. These devices that they used, and under the ground as well. They didn't reveal all of that. They did not reveal all of that, the parachutes that they used. And obviously, look, many people suspected at the time that Israel knew something and they enabled it. Tanvir Rahman heard Germany's banning the triangle symbol. Yeah, Germany's banning the triangle symbol. Germany, if you want to get a German citizenship, you are asked about your views on Israel. Can it get even more ridiculous than that? Can it get more ridiculous than that? Germany is one of the most Zionist countries on the planet. They just don't want to dig that part of history. They know how ugly it is. And they know how their country at the time was collaborating with Zionism. And they take all of this to cover up a genocide. They're afraid of symbols, like Israel. They're banning flags, banning raising the Palestinian flag. I always wondered, what's so scary about a flag? A country that is afraid of a flag? You must be so weak. You have such a lack of faith in yourself. You're petrified. You're petrified. You're scared of your own shadow. Why? Because you know you're thieves. You know you're criminals. And when people raise the flag in front of you, they remind you of who you are. So you don't want to see it. You'd rather be in denial. Germany is doing the same thing. Marvin Vergus, Lebanon 82 war. So that's the first Lebanon war. What was the goal of the Zions? PLO in peak power. What resistance groups are around? Old from 82. Well, the main reason was to take down the PLO because they were very strong in Lebanon. But clearly that wasn't only the case. They occupied territories and they created the South Lebanon Army. In 82, you had many movements resisting. Obviously, the PLO, some Palestinian groups. Hizbullah was just a freshly newly established organization who were fighting alongside Amal as well and other groups in Lebanon. And obviously, the occupation continued until 2000. And most of the lands were liberated. And obviously in 2006, you had the second Lebanese war. and that was to do with Lebanese prisoners at the time that Israel refused to release previously, with other agreements with Hizbullah, although they were warned at the time by Hezbollah, like, you're going to pay the price for not releasing them. And they did. And they did. And that was very close to the time when Hamas kidnapped Gilad Shalit. They took him out of his tank, and one fighter put him on his shoulder, and he ran 600 meters with him up until he reached the tunnel, and he took him to Gaza. Hezbollah reached a deal in 2008, whereas with Hamas it took up until 2011 to reach a deal for a prisoner exchange at the time. And one of the reasons that they did not have a prisoner exchange with Hamas, because Hamas has Israelis with them since 2014, by the way. Many people don't know that. Israel did not want to play on that card again. So they used the Hannibal Directive against one of the soldiers that were captured by Hamas. Although Hamas didn't confirm whether he was dead or alive at the time, but some of the Israelis are alive with them. The families were obviously criticizing, but then you were talking about individual families, and the government could pacify the situation. And then obviously we had the 7th of October. Although again, Hamas warned them before. Yahya Sinwar, the Hamas leader in Gaza, he told Israel in 2001, if you don't give us our rights, if we don't establish a state as well and reach a deal with the prisoners, we will burn everything. We will burn you down. And he was serious. And that's what happened. That's what happened. Let's see if we have anything else. Kate, illegal settlers have been protesting, demanding the removal of Milakovsky. Do you think he will? Well, he behaves and acts as if nothing is happening. The Israeli streets have been on fire for the past 9 months, hardly getting any coverage in mainstream media. They get some coverage in Israel, but the Israeli government pretends as if they're not happening. Now, he is facing protests from obviously the Israeli public, the families of those who are kidnapped in Gaza, the Orthodox community, and some in the radical settler movement, especially those who are feeling like he's about to betray them by having a deal. And that could be a move done by Ben Gvir to show Netanyahu that I have followers, and we can give you a headache. But Netanyahu is totally careless about the people. You see, he does not care whatsoever. People need to understand his mentality. He exhausted the state for so long just because of his greed and his own interests. I mean, if you're a person running for prime minister position, and you have a coalition, then you fail to have a coalition, then you try one more time, then you fail again. You think to yourself, I've tried this for several times. Clearly, I'm not getting consistency here. I'm not being loyal to my country. I'm exhausting the resources. Not him. He will exhaust everything. He will take the country down so that he gets what he wants as a person, as an individual, careless of whatever happens. So it's as if he's not seeing what's happening on the streets. not listening to the families of those who are kidnapped in Gaza. But now your army is telling you, we want to deal with Hamas at any cost, good or bad. It reached this level. And we'll see if they agree or not to the latest proposal. Jimmy Eyes, has there been any proof that Zionists have nuclear weapons? Do you think America has removed them if they are there due to possible collapse? Well, the first person who released substantial information about the Israeli nuclear program was an Israeli named Mordechai Vanunu. And then he was kidnapped from London. And obviously we had other statements coming out from people like the previous Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, who once said in a statement, Iran is seeking to have nuclear weapons like, if I'm not mistaken, America, France, Britain, Israel. He included Israel, confirming, right? He didn't mean to, confirming that Israel has nuclear weapons. You had this minister saying we should nuke Gaza, hinting that you do have, confirming that you do have. And they've been always shady about it. And the fascinating thing is, the genocide cartel, who call themselves the international community, never questioned Israel about their nuclear weapons. They bark on Iran. They bark like rabid dogs on Iran 24/7. Nuclear energy, no, no, no. Woof, woof, woof. But Israel, a genocidal supremacist entity, a reckless expansionist state, with a track record of genocide and occupation and attacking other countries on a regular basis, you don't question their nuclear weapons. Why? Because they're your extension. That's why. Countries with thousands of nuclear warheads, in feeling like they're entitled to tell other countries that they don't like, oh no, you can't have nuclear energy. But Israel reportedly having 300 nuclear warheads, acting as reckless and as criminal and as abhorrent and as depraved as it does, no one questions it. Why? Because it's their extension. And obviously they have the same arrogant approach as Israel. You know, we're entitled, but not you. Sorry, that's not how it works, my friend. And the world is changing now. And if the US will take, in the case of collapse, the US will have a big say when it comes to the collapse. Yeah. 100%. Because you need to understand, Israel does not survive a day without the US. They do not survive one day without the US, and that is a very good observation, and I think they will, of course. Because if you're talking about a neo-colonialist front being dismantled, that's loyal to the United States, being dismantled, and another country is being formed, a democratic country being formed. And obviously already something like nuclear weapons is already something very top secret that very few people in Israel know about. They hardly know, you know. Very few people know the details and the ins and outs about it. Tanvir Rahman, do you think Israel will release Maran Barghouthi? And what happens if they release him? There is a very high likelihood of him being released. If he is released, it would be a massive blow to Israel, because Marwan al-Barghouthi is a man who has a lot of popularity amongst Palestinian people, amongst especially Fatah supporters, and he is a big challenger to Mahmoud Abbas, Abu Mazen, and his release would be catastrophic for the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. They will act like they welcome him and hug him and kiss him, but they would rather he dies in an Israeli prison than be released. So it would be a blow to Israel. It would be a blow to the Palestinian Authority. In the general grand scheme of things, I think it could potentially be good for the national movement in Palestine, because you would have leaders who are more inclined to be with the people from different parties, and that's something important. Obviously have someone like Ahmed Saadat as well, the Secretary General of the PFLP. If he gets released, that's also something that would boost the potential of national unity as well. Because now what's preventing national unity, and that's something shameful in the case of the Palestinian cause, is the West Bank Authority led by the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, as confirmed by many people who are not aligned with Hamas, by the way. So if the people who challenge him are released, they would put him in a corner because he's already facing a very tough time. Marvin, who else apart from the US and UK giving money to Israel? Germany is still giving them. Other countries are giving them at a lower profile, really. They make it hidden, right? Like, for example, when the Netherlands stopped exporting parts for the F-35, there were reports that they were still supplying them indirectly, as in through a third-party country. And that's something that's common. We obviously had countries that were close to Israel, and as a matter of fact, top 10 suppliers like Canada saying, arms exports ban, but they still do support them. However, the biggest supporter is the US. No one can take the place of the United States. That's the thing. The US is the biggest supporter of Israel. Kate, what are the true numbers estimate of IOF dead? In my estimate, I'd think 20 to 30,000 Israeli troops dead. Based on information that's released from Israel and statistically speaking, if they said 70,000 disabled, and 70,000 disabled, urban warfare stats, 3 wounded per 1 killed. If 70,000 are disabled, how many are wounded? What is it, 1 per 2 disabled? The statistic of disabled. Let's say 30,000. So that means 100,000 are wounded, right? What's a third of that? 30,000, 33,000, 333. But you're not talking even about traditional urban warfare. Urban warfare is done usually between buildings that are to a large extent intact. Gaza is flattened, which makes things much more difficult for the invader. Therefore, the casualties, the confirmed dead number would be much higher than a traditional urban warfare. That's why I personally estimate that 20 to 30,000 Israeli soldiers have been killed. J. Artiste, the Orthodox Jews, do they just want to avoid fighting because they are selfish, or do some of them have empathy towards the Palestinians? Yes, some of them are selfish and they just want to do whatever they want. Some of them are anti-Zionists, and some of them do have empathy for the Palestinians. The vast majority of them, they are just concerned about their own interest. There is a good chunk of anti-Zionists who believe that Zionism is against Judaism. Many of them have a relationship of convenience with the state and with the government. That's why you'll find them going into coalitions as much as possible, just to be in the government and get what they want, get the funding and what have you. Like, some of their leaders were in prison for years for corruption, like a person like Aryeh Deri, for example. He was in years of prison for corruption. There's a lot of corruption in the Orthodox community, by the way, in Israel, those in the government. But some people obviously have different reasons. However, in the grand scheme of things, their resistance for serving in the IDF is something very solid. It's not something that can be shaken or taken lightly. So where Israel can succeed with a couple of thousand, they will not succeed ever with even a significant chunk of them to cover their needs in the army. They view the army as blasphemous, an army that does not respect the Shabbat, Sabbath, an army that mixes men and women. To them, that's blasphemous. Marvin Burgess, when Palestine becomes a nation, how many political parties do you envision? Will 13 resistance groups have own parties or chaos? Well, you would obviously see some movements merge. You would obviously see the traditional alliances. You would see traditional ideologies and potentially something new coming up. So I would obviously assume that you would still have parties with religious backgrounds. You'd have parties that have more secular leniency. You would have parties that have more of a socialist background. And you might have parties with like new ideologies. And obviously, even if you talk about the Palestinian scope, you already have political parties. Like Hamas has a political party, and other movements have political parties, the PFLP. But at the same time, they have like an armed wing or what have you. If you're talking about a liberated nation, full equality, equal rights, and everything, and all of that is sorted, that's it. You merge, you make a national army or whatever. So long as it's a national army, right? Not a foreign army or some armed people bound by foreigners, foreign entities, or US imperialism or what have you. Vivet, pleasure. Thank you for your membership and comment. You asked if there's anything from the spokesperson of Al Qassam Brigades. We haven't had a statement from him lately. No. Most of the statements are coming out from leaders in the political bureau in concern with the ceasefire. So the most recent developments with that is we had a meeting between Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hizbullah, Secretary General, and two senior figures from Hamas called Khalil Hayy and Osama Hamdan in Lebanon with Nasrallah discussing the ceasefire and obviously making sure that everything is aligned and clear between Hamas and Hizbullah and all of the other resistance fronts. And obviously, they stated, the figures in Hamas, that they obviously had a positive response and they're just waiting today or tomorrow for an Israeli response to build upon that. And when I say a response, I mean a response to the recent amendment on the ceasefire proposal coming from Hamas, which has been sent to Israel, awaiting a response from Israel to Hamas's response, and obviously seeing if we can reach an agreement. There are a couple of things to do with clauses 8 and 14 in the ceasefire agreement. The first phase is pretty much sorted. We're talking about the guarantees of a continuation of the ceasefire if both parties fail to agree on phase 2, because although Hamas wanted to agree on all phases from the beginning, Israel does not want that. So they started to come up with this terminology and these clauses to do with what do we agree upon when, and if we don't agree, that means we continue the ceasefire, no more engaging, and what have you. A couple of details. But again, like I said yesterday, not going away from the thick lines, from the core principles of the Palestinian resistance, which are full withdrawal, full ending of the war, getting all people back to all parts of Gaza, allowing all aid in, and rebuilding Gaza, alongside, obviously, a prisoner exchange. Marvin, thank you so much. You said Zio, globalist, use USA as Zion insurance policy. Yeah, they're sucking up US taxpayers' money. I know the funny thing is with these governments, they have all of this money for Israel, they have all of this money for wars, but they don't have the money for the needy. They don't have money for the poor. They don't have money for the weakest people in society. They don't. Yet they'll convince the imbeciles that no, it's necessary and it's good and da, 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 da. And the people, many people follow like sheep, unfortunately. That's the reality across all of the world, And it's not just in a certain country here and there. People, to the most part, are manipulated and are fooled. And the people in power realize that. Many people don't question, don't read between the lines. They'll see a couple of headlines, believe what they're told. If the headlines tell them to shut up and instill fear in them, they'll be fearful and shut up. If they tell them, no, sympathize, that's the next big strength. Oh, yes, I sympathize. That's how most people operate, unfortunately. Including people in the US, including people across the globe, really, And the difference that can be made here is obviously not only through education and information and revealing all of the things that we speak about, but also persistence. Because the more you persist, the more you uncover things, the more they become a norm. And the last 8 months, proved how that can happen relatively quickly. In an era we have social media, regardless of our criticism of social media and censorship and politicization and control and agendas, regardless of all of that, there's still a space, a breathing space, some talking space, which is important. As a matter of fact, it's a core pillar for any functioning and democratic state, to be people to talk freely without intimidation or terrorism. Because mind you, when the government forces you to do something or instills fear in you to think a certain way and tells you, no, if you think the other way, then you are a really bad person. That's a form of terrorism, by the way. That's called state-sponsored terrorism, psychological terrorism. But again, many people don't know that. They're just, okay, whatever it is, we'll follow. You know what I mean? But obviously social media changed a lot now, and many people who are interested in certain things, they will not resort to obviously mainstream. Mainstream media is dead to them, like mainstream media is dead to many of you. Kate, what will happen to Abbas PA if Israel gets its way to grab more land in the West Bank? Nothing. What? Mahmoud Abbas is a doormat. Mahmoud Abbas is a puppet. He is there to serve Zionism. He's not there to do anything. He's there to have a peace process and continue and, condemn when you need to condemn. And that's about a little puppet, the man. Mayors in certain cities have more powers than Mahmoud Abbas. Let's not, forget that. The man is authorized and not authorized to move and speak and talk by the Israeli Secret Service and Israeli Shabak. They have him under the thumb, or under the boot even. Ramplans Mahmoud, have you heard that there are 900 Indian peacekeepers at the Israel-Lebanon border waiting to get in? The peacekeepers of that area would be UNIFIL peacekeepers belonging to the UN that have been there for a very long time. Funny enough, that Israel targeted many times, by the way. They killed many of them before in previous wars, including in 2006. So I don't think they're new or anything of the sort, by the way. You're local and I can't see the rest of the world. Thank you for your super. He said, any thoughts on Iranian elections? Good democratic elections. About 30 million voted. You know, how much is the Iranian population? 70, 80, 88 million. So less than 50% turnout, not the biggest turnout. Still, you had democratic elections. They say Pezeshkian is more of a reformist. He was, holding the banner of Musawi, who had what was labeled as the Green Revolution at the time, but then he had faced restrictions. Look, the man is saying that he wants to have certain reforms in Iran and, things to do with like enforcement of certain, dress codes on women and stuff like that, which I think is good. I don't think you should enforce people what to wear or get into people's personal lives. Obviously, the thick lines won't change. The main agendas and policies will not change that much, because anyone, if they reach a level where they are a presidential candidate, that's approved by the Supreme Council in Iran. And obviously the Supreme Council's main aim is to protect the revolution. So whether he is a Khamenei loyalist more or less, it doesn't make a lot of difference when it comes to the main policies. He might have a better tone with Europe or what have you, but Iran will remain Iran, because the system you have in place is a solid system. And obviously hasn't been tested yet. I mean, I heard his name for the first time now. I heard some of his opponents' names before, like Jalili and what have you, Ahmadinejad. But obviously, clearly, the Iranian people seek a change in certain aspects of Iran, which is, again, why not? He's considered a reformist. Reform is good. And we'll see how he manages, how he runs Iran. He was advised by the supreme leader to continue the path of Raisi. But again, he's, the president, so he will have some level of independence. And we wish Iran all of the best. That's what we can say. We wish Iran all of the best. Marvin Vergus, Starmer in, Galloway out. Very disappointed. I understand some pro-Palestine candidates got in. Your thoughts? Any change towards Palestine, Israel? The elections in Britain reflect the general feel of the British public when it comes to politics. I mean, it says a lot. When the mainstream media tells them, oh, this person is good and he's suitable to become a prime minister, they'll vote for him. Whenever mainstream media kills someone, takes someone down, or brings someone up, most of the people will follow. That's how it works. And Keir Starmer is a prime example. You're talking about a person who isn't authentic, who doesn't have any substantial changes, really. He's definitely no lefty. The person was in a secret or the trilateral group that was headed by the CIA. Some people say he's an MI6 agent as well, and that he obviously is a Zionist lapdog too, right? He'll come up with a couple of fake populist ideas, right? And some people get fooled by that. So it's typical, really. Galloway out, obviously, again, the people voted. Like I said, so some pro-Palestinians came, yeah, which is good. I mean, I think it's important for Palestine to be present in the conversation, because Britain as a country is complicit in this garbage, and they're still complicit in genocide. And many of them gave, by the way, candidates a hard run. Like you spoke about a couple of hundreds of votes. Any change towards Palestine and Israel? No. You will not see a change towards Palestine and Israel, because you have a Zionist prime minister. A Zionist prime minister who, during the early days of the genocide, supported cutting off water and electricity of babies in Gaza. That's a criminal. That's a genocidal criminal running the country. He asked his party members to oppose a ceasefire. That's a criminal. That's a genocide supporting criminal. But hey, we're used to genocide supporting criminals in power in Britain and in the US. So what's new? I hope that elaborates. That was from Marvin. Hanif Demiral, thank you so much for your super. You said, will Israel continue to control Gaza and keep the Palestinians in concentration camp and control everything after the ceasefire? If you mean control without presence on the ground, as in dictating what happens with the crossings and what have you, to an extent, but obviously there would be an agreement. Like before the war, you had 500 trucks going into Gaza every day, some of them through Israel, in agreement with Hamas. So if Israel wants to starve Gaza, and they can, like what they're doing, how they cut everything off in the beginning as well, like how they're starving people to death now. But usually if we see a de-escalation, you would talk about a more of a normality. There will be some sort of normality when it comes to aid, and Israel wouldn't want to do stuff that would instigate another escalation, especially after the devastating blow that they've got now. Gaza will continue to be a concentration camp, and you will still have injustice, and it will not be solved up until we see the dismantling of apartheid Zionist Israel. Once apartheid Zionist Israel, once supremacy ends and equality is implemented, then we're seeing a difference. But if we have a ceasefire now, you're still talking about a very high, tense situation moving forward up until we reach an all-out solution. And an all-out solution cannot be accomplished with the existence of a supremacist genocidal ideology controlling the state of Israel. And there is a very high likelihood of an all-out war breaking out that could include countries that we haven't seen participate so far. Molly's saying, I love how you say everything so unfiltered. Thank you, and thank you for your membership, Molly. Why would we filter anything? Filter it for who exactly? Not seeking approval from anyone or anything, And it's my duty, I think. So unfiltered is the way. Raw is the way. Thank you for that. Jimmy Eyes, Genocide Joe is considering cloning John Rambo and sending them to Zioland because Israel has losing so bad. I think Genocide Joe, if he himself would copy Rambo, he would do an amazing job. He would do an amazing job. Go. You love them, you want to support them, go. Silvestra Pejakic, it's an interesting question. Just short, want to know what is the last with the hostages? Did they talk or did they keep silent on how good it was Hamas with them? After the first hostage, the first prisoner was released, Yocheved Lifshitz, alongside another woman who were released on a humanitarian basis from Hamas, who did not want anything in return, like with others who were imprisoned by groups that were not controlled by Hamas on the 7th of October. By the way, you need to remember that. Because some personal movements in Gaza also invaded Israel, and they also kidnapped. But Hamas saw some of them as people who cannot be imprisoned, and they got them back to Israel. One of them was Yocheved Lifshitz and another woman. Israel did not want to accept them on a humanitarian basis. So imagine that. Israel did not want to accept their own citizen from Hamas as a goodwill gesture. They offered it twice. The second time, what did Hamas do? They said, we are keen on releasing this woman. We are keen on releasing this woman. She is old. She shouldn't have been here. And they sent her to Egypt. And when they sent her to Egypt, Israel had to take her. She was the woman seen shaking hands with Al-Qassam fighter, saying shalom. You know, these images that certain platforms have a problem with us putting on videos and what have you, and then you get told off for doing that. But hey, there's other platforms to do that in. Anyway, she went and she had a press conference. She had a press conference, half an hour press conference. And I remember in that press conference, I sat down and I wrote everything word per word, because I was sure that that's going to be spinned and some parts are going to be deleted and what have you. And Israel was clearly making a mistake by letting her speak. We were treated nicely. They were supporting us. They were caring for women's hygiene. I had a doctor with me. The fighter was wounded and he's still protecting me. And she's saying things about how Israel was shooting at them wherever they were, trying to kill them. Israel at the time said it was a Hasbara disaster, basically. It was a Hasbara disaster. It was a disaster PR thing this woman did to us. And you saw mainstream media in the UK and in the US spinning it, you know, showing the pictures and putting Hamas to shame or whatever. She, out of her own will, went back to this fighter, shook hands, telling him shalom, salam, peace. Why would she do that if he was such a bad guy? Anyway, she said about how well-mannered they were and how kind they were. And obviously, that was evident from the other videos that we saw when these people were shaking hands with Hamas fighters and hugging sometimes and bye and smiling. That's not something you do. Anyway, after Israel had that problem, they started controlling what people say. So they started having the indoctrination. First few months, they were banned from talking with mainstream media. Very few of them spoke. Some of those who spoke let slip about some positive stuff, but clearly everything was under control when it comes to Israel. And they're very worried about what's to come. They are exceptionally worried. And they started having these theories in Israel. Oh, Hamas drugged them. They gave them drugs to say good things. They gave them drugs to say good things about them. Well, why don't you give the Palestinian people drugs to say good things about you? Why doesn't that work? Why do the Israeli prisoners look healthy and happy and smiling when they leave, and the Palestinians losing 30 kg on average or dead in prison? As a policy, right? So they're doing that. And I think they're going to have a problem with the ones who are coming. But again, they're going to try and, you know, have some damage control when it comes to them. Marvin Vergas was, what do you think when Palestine comes into being? Think China, Russia, Saudis will help finance the rebuilding? US will be mad. Palestine join BRICS seems like a logical course. Will the US allow it? Well, it will no longer be the case of the US allowing it. That's it. The US isn't the master of the universe, isn't the power that they would like to be. They still are delusional. They still think they live in the post-World War II era, but that's not the case. Many people in the US realize it. More and more people are criticizing their country's interference abroad that does not serve the American interest, that does not serve the American people, but only serves greedy people in power and greedy corporations. It will no longer be a case of will the US decide. The US, that's it, they're losing it anyway. That's it, the US is losing in the world. And they are slowly getting back to being their own kind of country on their own. Mind you, the US will, unless there's a civil war inside the US and, have many states starting to, exit the union. Like you had a lot of talk about Texas and Texit, they're calling it, like Brexit. But it will remain a powerful country, undeniably, unless something happens from within. But not the international bully. This role of the international bully is ending. And it's natural for a democratic Palestine to align more with countries that supported its independence or endeavors for liberation and ambitions. It's totally natural. And again, it doesn't have to be the case. I mean, the way I view it is, firstly, as human beings, we're all a human family. Secondly, as states, the ideal thing would be for states to deal with each other as equals, as equals, and deal with any country, really. But that's not the theme that US imperialism has been showing us around the world. What they've been showing is bullying, genocide, violence. And when you do that, you generate a response to that. And that's what's happening. And it will not be about them. Okay, do you think Israel or head of Snake are serious about the ceasefire proposal? Israel just reject the commitment on second phase. I still say it's a fake ceasefire. So long as we don't have a ceasefire, there is no ceasefire. This is how I view it. And obviously our job here is to monitor, obviously, what's happening and speak about the statements that we're getting. And the fact of the matter is, the tone that we're getting from officials in Israel now is the most positive so far. And again, that's not something to call for, optimism or pessimism. That's just how it is. Will it come to fruition? We will see. They're due to submit a full response now. Whether that response will require further elaboration or a change of terminology or an amendment of any clause or two, we will see about that. But listen, on the ground, they're failing. They are failing. The fact that they are still talking with Hamas means they're failing miserably. If they were winning, they wouldn't talk. They're the most arrogant people on earth. They would not talk. They would be imposing. And they're acting like that with the population. That's why they're killing so many innocent civilians for fun, to feel this, to play this God role. They like playing the role of God, right? Killing people whenever we act for fun and joking about it, Very dark stuff. To cover up their failure. And Israel cannot handle a very long-term war of attrition. And again, what Hamas has done to them on the 7th of October is unprecedented. It's the biggest hit since the establishment of Israel. Israel was never hit like that. And then obviously the resistance fronts joining, they put them in a very bad position. Okay, let's see if we have anything else before we wrap up. Yeah, I'll finish with Tanvir. Tanvir is saying there are over 21,000 Palestinian hostages. Yes, So the number of Palestinian prisons in Israeli prisons has tripled since the 7th of October. And they are going through systematic starvation, slow death. You're talking about people getting released, losing 30 kilos on average. It's like 70 pounds. Because the person in charge of the prisons, Itamar Ben-Gvir, supports capital punishment. Firstly, he says we need to shoot them in the head, all of them. And he ordered his people who are in charge of prisons to make life as hard as possible. And he enabled torture. That's why many of them are tortured to death. And we'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me. Again, apologies if I missed some of your comments, just obviously the live chat, and I have lots of comments coming in, but I'm here with you regularly anyway. But thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for your time. And a special thanks to anyone who sent super as well. Much appreciated. Thank you so much. Chocolate Pudding, Studio Rainer, Stephen Burrows, Francis Fitzgerald, Muhammad Yunus, Marvin, your local, and Hanif Demiral. Thank you so much. Apart from that, enjoy the rest of your day, night, or evening, depending on where you are. Thank you so much for joining in. Again, I'll hopefully be with you tomorrow. And have a lovely evening. Stay safe, stay blessed, and I'll see you soon in the next video. Peace, everyone.